Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of BTTH Rebirth of Emperor Yang episode number 149 based on novel. So let's start. Above the void, Xiao Yang slowly turned around and glanced at the scene for a week. Finally, he looked at Sun Shao from a distance. His eyebrows under his black robe frowned tightly. He knew that he might be in trouble now. After hearing the words from Sun Shao, the strong fighters on the spot also threw surprised eyes at Xiao Yang. Unexpectedly, the black-robed man who had previously blasted a stone pier with his own fist would be Xiao Yang, who had exhausted his brains to eradicate the four major sect. Xiao Yang. So he is that Xiao Yang. It is said that not long ago he made a big fuss in Hanshi City. Unexpectedly, he came to this ancient ruins. Hey, there's a good play now. I heard that Sun Hanshi died in Xiao Yang's hand. I don't believe it. Now it seems that Xiao Yang must be gone this time. As the surprised eyes gradually retracted, then what came out of the crowd was another sneer full of banter. At the same time, Sun Shao's face at this time also became as gloomy as water, and the killing intention in the depths of his pupils was almost thin. Poof! Suddenly, Sun Shao's body suddenly shook. With a puff, the surging and powerful fighting spirit in his body immediately poured out of his body. Then Sun Shao's thug suddenly grasped it and immediately appeared in his hand. Seeing this scene, Bai Ying on the void in the distance couldn't help raising her eyebrows slightly. She looked at this side first, and then looked at the location of Zhuolin. He believed that with Zhuobentang's heart, he would never take the initiative to fight Xiao Yang unless he was instructed by Zhuolin. Sure enough, after noticing Bai Ying's eyes, Zhuolin also looked at them. Immediately, the corners of Zhuolin's mouth aroused a radiance and smiled coldly. Seeing this, Bai Ying was shocked by Zhuolin's terrible judgment. Since Xiao Yang entered the ruins, he didn't show any flaws in his vision. But Rao is so. He will still be recognized by Zhuolin. I have to say, Zhuolin is really a terrible person. This guy is Xiao Yang. On the other side of the void, Hubei was also staring at Xiao Yang, who was watched by everyone in the field with an unbelievable face. The mysterious figure he had expected to make friends with earlier, unexpectedly, in this twinkling of an eye, he turned into Xiao Yang named by the four main doors. This contrast made Hubei feel like lightning for a time. You killed my son Hanshi? Sun Shao's voice was cold and hoarse, and his face became distorted at this moment. The big knife in his hand was raised forward, and the tip of the knife reflecting Sen's cold light pointed directly at Xiao Yang. The green tendons on the palm holding the handle of the knife burst, causing the whole palm to tremble slightly because of its strength. Hearing the speech, Xiao Yang shrugged his shoulders non-committally, smiled and asked, "If I said no, would you believe it?" As soon as Xiao Yang said this, the muscles in the corners of Sun Shao's eyes suddenly trembled violently. Immediately after that, he squandered his big knife and split 3 knives forward one after another. For a short time, the 3 amazing terrorist knives tore the void in an instant and killed Xiao Yang. 3-knife robbery. When the cry fell, Sun Shao's body suddenly shook, and the soles of his feet immediately stepped on the void. His strong body shot at Xiao Yang like a loaded shell. Waving the big knife in his hand, he tore up the void in front of him. Sun Shao's body rushed forward and became more rapid. Seeing the 3 Dao lights and Sun Shao shot at him, the look in Xiao Yang's eyes also quickly became cold. The fighting spirit in his body surged wildly. The big hand under his sleeve robe waved fiercely, and the black dark heavy ruler immediately appeared in Xiao Yang's palm. Now that you have been recognized, there is no need to hide. At the same time, as soon as his wrist turned, the black heavy ruler with heavy pressure fell on the void on one side. The heavy ruler fell and made a slight sound of breaking the air. Then, Xiao Yang's arm shook slightly. Just listen to a puff, and the gorgeous fire immediately covered the whole giant ruler. The flame devours the wave ruler. In the next moment, Xiao Yang fiercely waved his huge foot forward, and the different fire flew over, just like a gorgeous rainbow. He scratched hard from the void in front of Xiao Yang, and then collided with the 3 oncoming sabers. Boom! The roar shook the world, and then a powerful energy storm swept rapidly in all directions centered on the place where the 2 collided. Seeing this scene, everyone in the field quickly retreated and dispersed. At the same time, the other 3 people quietly focused on the inheritance of fighting spirit. While everyone was distracted, at this moment, it was the best time to compete for the inheritance of fighting spirit. Therefore, while the battle on this side has just started, on the other side, the 3 families headed by Zhuolin also began their own struggle. Ha ha, Child Shui is really clever. Unexpectedly, I can guess that the man in black robe is Xiao Yan. I really admire him. Above the void, Bai Ying, Hua and Zhuolin each occupy one side, like a triangle, surrounding the fighting spirit in the center. Hihi, I'm just guessing out of thin air. I just didn't expect that Xiao Yang would appear in the result. Do you think so, Bai leader? Zhuolin stared at Bai Ying, who was laughing at him at the moment, and his eyes narrowed slowly and meaningfully. Ah! As soon as Zhuolin said this, Bai Ying couldn't help but be a little stunned. In the depths of his sharp eyes, he couldn't help pouring a little cold light. On the other side, Hua listened to the inexplicable dialogue between the two strategies in front of him. When his eyes turned, he looked at Zhuolin and smiled. Ha ha, Child Shui, I'm afraid there's something else in your words. After saying that, Hua turned to Bai Ying again. His eyes seemed to be waiting for the latter's answer. Hum. With a faint cold hum, Bai Ying stopped talking. Zhuolin smiled non-committally and didn't go on. However, he was almost sure that Bai Jiabai's strength would not be inferior to him. With this in mind, Zhuolin can't help feeling dignified. If it's true, the White House is really deep enough. Sure. At the next moment, Hua suddenly turned his body and rushed to the fighting spirit inheritance. Hey, since you are modest, I will accept it for you. Then, Bai and Zhuo quickly returned to their senses. They almost gave a cold hum at the same time. They also rushed up without hesitation. At the same time, on the square, the energy storm swept by the explosion has not dispersed. However, within it, the sound of violent collision one after another is constantly coming out, which makes everyone around turn pale. Bang! Suddenly, another violent collision of metal and iron sounded. In the energy storm that had not yet dispersed, two figures suddenly flew out of it, retreating hundreds of feet and glared at each other. People saw that there were injuries on the two people. It seemed that after a fierce collision just now, the two people seemed to have their own strengths. No one has anything to do with anyone. I want your blood to pay for my son's life. He gasped violently in his mouth for a while. Then, Sun Shoror suddenly looked up, his killing intentions surged in his eyes, and his wrist turned quickly. After circling in the palm of his hand, he was fiercely thrown out by him, with the blade facing forward and stabbing Xiao Yang fiercely. At the place where the broadsword passed, there was a sharp and piercing sound of breaking the void. Even the void space was forcibly torn open, with clear cracks. Drink. Then, Sun Shoror's mouth suddenly gave a startling cry. At the same time, the strong tiger body shook fiercely, and his body flashed again. Unexpectedly, he had appeared in front of Xiao Yang. His big hand clenched into a fist. The yellow fighting spirit rushed out madly and wrapped the whole fist head. Then he hit Xiao Yang's head angrily. Look at this, obviously intended to kill with one blow. In this regard, Xiao Yang did not show weakness. His heart moved, and different fires surged in his body. The heavy giant ruler in his hand danced up and down. With extremely terrible power, he slashed away at the oncoming fist in front of him. Bang! With a dull bang, Xiao Yang's body immediately couldn't help flying back. Sun Shoror paid a lot for this collision. Of course, the results also defeated Xiao Yang. But then, Sun Shoror's body shape flashed again, and at the same time, at the moment when the latter's body shape disappeared, Xiao Yang saw that the big knife also came to him. Seeing this scene, Xiao Yang didn't want to think about it. He waved the huge ruler in front of him, which was to easily block the oncoming broadsword. But he didn't wait for Xiao Yang to breathe. The next moment, behind him, Sun Shoror's body suddenly appeared, and a punch fell heavily on Xiao Yang's head. Die. Until this moment, Xiao Yang completely recovered. The previous blow was just a cover. Even this knife was just to divert his sight. At the moment, Sun Shoror suddenly appeared behind him. This is the real killing move. The heart was a little tight. I didn't expect Sun Shoror to have such an idea, but then Xiao Yang gave a cold hum in his nose, moved his body, and dodged aside without hesitation. Although he knew he couldn't escape, Xiao Yang still didn't have any panic in his heart. Then, at the next moment, when Sun Shoror's fist was about to fall on Xiao Yang's head, under Xiao Yang's sleeve robe, a strange black light suddenly swept out and forcibly stopped Sun Shoror's fist. Bang! When the blow fell, Xiao Yang's body also successfully avoided. Although it seemed a little embarrassed, it was okay, but he didn't get hurt. In the twinkling of an eye, Sun Shoror hurried back 100 steps without control of his body and mind. Then his body shook and forcibly stabilized on the void. When he looked up, at this moment, a A small snake with only half the length of an adult's arm hovered and stood in the void in front of Xiao Yang. A pair of scarlet eyes like gemstones were staring at Sun Shuo with murderous intention. "This is the narwhal snake. It's you, beast." Sun Shuo's mouth sent out an angry rebuke, and his killing intention was awe-inspiring. Roar. Hearing Sun Shuo's words, the narwhal also roared in the snake's mouth. At the same time, its petite body suddenly twisted, but in the twinkling of an eye, it had recovered its original shape. Even if you restore your body, you're just a star warrior. In front of your real strength, you're also a mole ant. Seeing that the narwhal snake had recovered its body, Sun Shuo couldn't help but change his expression slightly, and then a look of disdain poured into his eyes. He's right. In Yuanwu mainland, everything is based on strength. Here, no one is afraid of anyone because of the size of his body, only because of the strength. The law of the jungle, fighting spirit and source chi are the real rules of the world. Oh. Well, since it's not your opponent, what if you add me? Xiao Yang smiled coldly. Sun Shuo's words are undeniable, but don't forget that Xiao Yang is not the only narwhal snake. With a cold hum, Sun Shuo didn't give an accurate answer, but waved his big hand, and the big knife in his hand immediately sent out a sharp breaking wind in the air. Seeing this appearance, Xiao Yang looked at each other with the narwhal snake, and immediately nodded with a tacit understanding. The next moment, he started together and rushed away at Sun Shuo. Die. Seeing this, Sun Shuo uttered a cold hum of disdain in his mouth. His body moved, waved his big knife and rushed to Xiao Yang. At the same time, in the battle circle on the other side, with the gradual development of the situation, the remaining dozens of strong fighters are also involved, competing with each other for the inheritance of the fighting spirit. The fighting between the two places became more and more intense with the slow passage of time. In the end, the fighting spirit inheritance was like a volleyball, which was constantly passed over the heads of a group of strong fighting emperors. Whenever a strong fighting emperor took it into his hand, it would be the joint siege of more strong fighting emperors in China. This has led to the current situation. As for Xiao Yang, although the joint power of Xiao Yang and narwhal snake is not bad, Sun Shuo is worthy of being a powerful 3-star fighting emperor. Relying on his strong strength, he still pressed Xiao Yang down for a time, which makes Xiao Yang feel dignified. At the same time, it is also the king of Jiangbei who sacrificed them again. Sure enough, with the help of the North King, Xiao Yang joined forces with the narwhal snake, plus an immortal North King. Whatever Sun Shuo did, he would be forcibly blocked by the king. Although the price seemed very heavy, fortunately, with the terrible recovery power of the Black Thunder, the injury suffered by the North King will also recover rapidly with the naked eye. This scene made Sun Shuo's face look iron blue. How could he expect that the puppet with terrible strength in front of him would not die? He would still bear such terrible recovery power. How could he continue to fight this evil opponent? Think again about Xiao Yang, a puppet and a master. Isn't Chengdu from the same mold? It's more and more terrible, but even so, Xiao Yang killed his son. He wants Xiao Yang to pay off this account anyway today. Of course, in the final analysis, it's just Sun Shuo's idea of going his own way. With the protection of Narwhal Snake and North King, and Xiao Yang's strength far exceeds his own level, the three can't defeat him alone. Bang! With a loud noise, the purple and golden Beiwang flew out of his body uncontrollably. Looking at this, it was obvious that he was hit by Sun Shuo again. However, Xiao Yang and others seemed to be used to it. There was no change in their facial expression. On the contrary, their attacks became more and more fierce. Rao saw such an attack from Sun Shuo, also had to retreat. Tut tut, Xiao Yang, you puppet are really terrible. If you have more of this strange recovery ability, I'm afraid you don't have to do it. You'll kill this guy if you do it. Seeing the pit on the North King's body table that was recovering rapidly with the naked eye, the narwhal snake couldn't help but smack his mouth and said with a smile. At the same time, a record of the tail of the snake fell heavily and blasted Sun Shuo's body out. Then he looked at Xiao Yang. Hearing the speech, Xiao Yang shook his head helplessly, smiled bitterly and said, "There is no such good thing in the world. You take this puppet too simply. The strength of an ordinary puppet can only reach the level of Dozuan at most. The reason why Beiwang can be promoted to Dudi is not only because of his particularity, but also because some unexplainable changes have taken place in his body. It is because of these changes that his recovery speed is far more extraordinary, my puppet." Hearing these words, the narwhal snake nodded his huge head as if he understood. Then, as soon as his sight turned, he looked at Sun Shuo again. At this time, Sun Shuro also widened his eyes and stared at Xiao Yang and Narwhal Snake opposite. The two guys in front of him not only suppressed his strength through a puppet, but also chatted in front of him, but they didn't pay attention to him. Damn. I really thought I couldn't clean up you. When Sun Shuro became angry, even if he roared up to the sky and roared for a long time, the fighting spirit in his body was like the burst of the Yellow River. He poured out of his body crazily. Even the momentum that had gradually withered was also rapidly restored to the peak in this short moment of time. Even in the end, Sun Shuro's breath, it was stronger than his peak. At the moment, Sun Shuro's strength has reached the late stage of the 3-star duty. Even if he is only a short distance from the 4-star duty. Secret method? Seeing this scene, the look in Xiao Yang's eyes could not help but coagulate slightly. However, just as the idea in Xiao Yang's heart had just risen. Then the next moment, Sun Shuro's body moved, leaving a residual shadow in place, but his body has disappeared. After a flash, Xiao Yang's face suddenly changed. The Xian heavy ruler in his hand cut forward without hesitation. The next moment, he only heard a crisp sound of golden iron, a sharp spark, and a sharp knife, which suddenly appeared in the space in front of Xiao Yang. Subsequently, Sun Shuro's body shape also slowly manifested. You're still the first to force me to use Huashue for so many years. His eyes were scarlet. Sun Shuro shouted ferociously in his mouth, and his body suddenly shook. In Xiao Yang's rapidly changing face, the terrible fighting spirit suddenly poured down on the big knife. With only one blow, he blew Xiao Yang's body out. Puff! His face suddenly turned red. Then, Xiao Yang couldn't help spitting out a mouthful of bright red blood. Immediately, he raised his head, but saw the narwhal snake, which was severely trampled under his feet by Sun Shuro. After the strength of the 3-star duty strongman completely broke out, it is not a 1-star duty strongman who can compete with it at all. At this time, Bei Wang, who had completely recovered from his injury, was like a shell. He suddenly appeared in front of Sun Shuro. He waved a huge fist and hit Sun Shuro's head heavily. Get out. A word rolled down. This time, Sun Shuro was no longer depressed, but regained his domineering spirit. His scarlet eyes were full of cold and cruel colors. With a knife, the North King in front of him flew away in an instant. His fighting spirit soared and his anger soared. Sun Shuro's eyes turned and fell on Xiao Yang. Xiao Yang, bring me your life. Suddenly, the shrill cry spread all over the world. Sun Shuro's soul severely stepped on the body of the narwhal snake, pouring with great force, and his body exploded. In the mouth of the narwhal snake at his feet, there was a sad and shrill hissing sound. Sun Shuro's body was like a ghost. In a twinkling of an eye, he crossed the void and came not far in front of Xiao Yang. At this time, the North King who was blown out and the narwhal snake at this moment rushed forward again, trying to stop Sun Shuro's body. However, one person and one snake were blown out again by Sun Shuro. This time, the North King lost his combat power in a short time, leaving only the narwhal snake. He still tried his best to rush forward and stop Sun Shuro for Xiao Yang. Bang! 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 Again and again, he was mercilessly blasted out without mercy. The breath on the narwhal snake became weak. At the moment, Xiao Yang also tried his best to mobilize the fighting spirit in his body and poured into the mysterious ruler in his hand. And with the pouring of fighting spirit on the black-painted Xianchong ruler, the gorgeous light of different fire suddenly flourished, and a powerful smell of terror also came out gradually. Seeing the breath on the Xian heavy ruler in his hand gradually become thick, but at this time, Sun Shuro's body came to Xiao Yang earlier. At the same time, after it, a golden light came again. This time, Sun Shuro didn't even turn his head back. His backhand was a blow, which blew the golden light back out. Later, this was the narwhal snake that burst again. In the face of this sudden golden light, the narwhal snake just wanted to roar, and the light entered its body very abruptly. At this moment, except Sun Shuro, who completely ignored the outside world, all the people present were staring at the narwhal snake with stunned faces. Even the faces of the three families were also stunned. On the huge square, the murderous spirit filled the air, and the vast fighting spirit came down from the sky. Dozens of strong fighting emperors collided violently in the void, and the atmosphere on the field became more and more dignified until a certain moment. When the narwhal snake swallowed the oncoming golden light into its belly, the body shapes of all the people present seemed to turn into statues in an instant, and the atmosphere on the field suddenly solidified. This extremely unexpected scene in the field shocked everyone. Those who were still fighting for the inheritance of fighting spirit at the previous moment turned their faces suddenly at the next moment. They couldn't help but show a look of stunned on their faces. They couldn't think that the inheritance of fighting spirit would eventually fall into the mouth of the beast. This guy actually passed on his fighting spirit too, and swallowed it. Seeing this dramatic scene in the field, the muscles at the corners of the mouths of a group of Emperor fighting strong men couldn't help but twitch violently. People like myself have been fighting for it for a long time, and even some people have paid a lot for it. The so-called fighting spirit is passed on. Now it's good that Sun Shuro slapped it back and gave it to others. At this moment, the people present even have the heart to kill. Above the void, Sun Shuro knew nothing about all this and was facing Xiao Yang. At the moment, he was imagining the tragic appearance of Xiao Yang dying under his knife. If you dare to kill my son, the Emperor must break you into pieces. At the same time, Sun Shuro's body suddenly moved, his hand picked up the knife and fell down, and fought hard against Xiao Yang's head. The blade passed by, and the void was broken. Before the knife fell, the terrible vigorous wind had fallen hard against Xiao Yang's head, just like an invisible sharp blade, blowing the hair on Xiao Yang's head. With a powerful breath, Xiao Yang felt a sharp tingling on his scalp. Hiss! As soon as the wrist turned, the giant ruler also raised at the moment and met the big knife falling over his head. Xiao Yang is not a person who is afraid of life and death. Even if Sun Shuro's strength in front of him is terrible, this is not the reason why he is afraid to shrink back. Xiao Yang clearly understands that he has no retreat in the face of opponents at this level. He might as well let go and fight instead of giving up. Sometimes it's okay to fight for a chance to survive. However, when the Xian heavy ruler in Xiao Yang's hand was about to collide violently with the falling saber on his head, behind the two people, a terrible energy storm suddenly hit the two people. In a twinkling of an eye, it had come to the two people. The terrible energy storm did not give the two people any chance to react. When the weapons in their hands were about to touch each other, they came to the two people, just like a terrible wave, which shook them out instantly and drifted with the waves. They didn't return to their senses until 100 feet away. However, when they looked up, they were surprised to find that the source of this energy storm was the narwhal snake that was attracting attention at the moment. What did this guy do? How does it smell? Frowning at the narwhal snake in the field, Xiao Yang couldn't help but frown. But when he found that the breath in the latter's body suddenly became particularly powerful, the expression on Xiao Yang's face changed instantly. In the exploration of his soul power, the strength of the narwhal snake did not know why, from the original Starfighting Emperor to the early stage of the 3 Starfighting Emperor. Moreover, looking at this momentum, it seems that it will continue to improve. This guy. What did it do? This is just a change between short clips, which shocked Xiao Yang. Even if it is because it swallowed the snake demon core, it is impossible to improve its strength so much. After all, even the strength of the snake is only 2 stars fighting the Emperor, but the strength of the narwhal snake has been raised to the level of 3 stars fighting the Emperor. This made Xiao Yang wonder. Of course, in addition to Xiao Yang, I also have infinite horror in my heart at the moment. Naturally, there is Sun Shuro. Although he caused all this, he didn't know it, so that he saw the strength of narwhal snake becoming stronger and stronger, but he didn't have a clue in his heart. Damn, how can the strength of this beast suddenly increase so much? Sun Shuro frowned, his face was filled with a deep and dignified color, and he couldn't help scolding. Hey, Sun Shuro, I'm afraid I have to ask you. When Sun Shuro just spits out his words, Bai Ying in the crowd suddenly sneers. As soon as these words came out, a group of Emperor fighting strong men around him immediately threw a gloomy look at Sun Shuro, but this was not forbidden. The latter showed a look of doubt. What does this have to do with him? It seems that the good thing that clan leader Sun did to himself is unknown. Then let me explain it for you. Then, Huobie in another part of the crowd sneered at the moment, and on his face, he also showed a cold sneer. From that smile, it is not difficult to see that Huobie's heart is repressing an anger at the moment. What on earth do you mean? Sun Shuro frowned. Then Huobie opened his mouth and stated everything that had just happened. After listening to Huobie's narration, the expressions on the faces of Sun Shuro and Xiao Yang are also very different. Xiao Yang didn't have to say much. When he heard that the fighting spirit inheritance actually fell into the mouth of the narwhal snake, he was naturally surprised for the latter. At the same time, he was glad that there was a 3-star fighting emperor who could compete with the 4 families in front of him. In this way, Xiao Yang didn't have to worry too much about this relic trip. A 3-star fighting emperor is enough to frighten the people in front of them. As long as there are narwhals and snakes, even the 4 people in front of them don't dare to do it easily. As 3-star fighting emperor, They know how difficult a strong person of the same level is. Moreover, narwhals and snakes belong to ancient alien species and their strength is far beyond ordinary warcraft. Even if they are under the same level, it may not be its opponent. As for Sun Shuro at this time, after hearing Huobie's words, his face also looked iron-green. He didn't expect that his unintentional move would cause this situation. Sun Shuro, a 3-star fighting emperor-level unicorn whale snake, naturally knows the degree of trouble. Immediately, the dignified look on his face is even worse. Among the people on the other side, the other 3 are also looking at Sun Shuro coldly. If it weren't for this guy, the fighting spirit would definitely fall into their hands, especially Zhuo Lin, who has reached the 2-star fighting emperor. He is determined to inherit the fighting spirit. If he gets this, his position in the sect will be unshakable in the future. However, at present, it is completely destroyed because of Sun Shuro. How can he not feel angry in his heart? However, he also knew that it was obviously impossible to deal with Sun Shuro here according to the situation in the carving field. First of all, there were 2 other families around him, the current Xiao Yang family, which were enough for him to drink a pot. In order to take the overall situation into account, he had to force the resentment in his heart down. Xiao Yang. Looking at Xiao Yang, who is standing with Narwhal Snake on the opposite side, Sun Shuro is full of killing intention. He wants to tear Xiao Yang in front of him and swallow it into his mouth, but he also knows that it is impossible to move Xiao Yang with Narwhal Snake. Xiao Yang, can you only hide behind others? First you are a puppet, now you have to rely on this beast. Is that all you have? Full of anger, Sun Shuro bit his teeth and stared at Xiao Yang with his eyes. The killing intention in his eyes was very thin. He didn't disdain until after a good film was carved. Oh! Hearing the speech, Xiao Yang smiled coldly. She looked at each other sarcastically, shook her head, and then said with a sneer, "Isn't Chengdu like this for your Sun family? With the strength of fighting emperor level, you have to say such words twice and 3 times in the face of a half-emperor. Ha ha, I'm afraid your strength of fighting emperor is really refined to the dog." Xiao Yang. As soon as Xiao Yang's words fell, Sun Shuro's gloomy face suddenly turned red. When the angry cry came out, his body suddenly flashed. In the twinkling of an eye, he appeared in front of Xiao Yang. He waved a big knife in his hand and chopped it off Xiao Yang's head. Roar! However, in the void beside Xiao Yang, the huge narwhal snake suddenly twisted its body, and the huge snake tail swung fiercely. Then, a heavy blow immediately hit Sun Shuro's chest. Bang! With a dull bang, Sun Shuro's body flew out uncontrollably. With a big mouthful of red blood, Sun Shuro stepped back 100 steps in the void, and then stopped with great effort. The moment he looked up, Sun Shuro immediately saw the huge narwhal snake. At the moment, the latter is entrenched with Xiao Yanhu. Judging from the momentum that is still spreading from his body, the strength of narwhal snake is still improving rapidly with the naked eye. At the moment, the strength of the latter has actually reached the middle stage of the 3-star fighting emperor, which is no less than those of the 4 families present. I think if we let it continue like this, it's actually powerful. I'm afraid it's very likely to break through the 4-star duty. With this in mind, the other 3 families present could not help frowning. Zhuo Lin, in particular, was even more depressed after he noticed the change in the breath of the narwhal snake. If nothing unexpected happened, the fighting inheritance should have belonged to him, but in the end, it was swallowed by the narwhal snake in front of him. This is really unacceptable to him. Sun Shuro, in the final analysis, this accident should be on your head. When we go back, the 3 of us will jointly report this matter to the Pope. I don't know what situation your Sun family will face at that time. At this time, Huobie narrowed his eyes and stared at Sun Shuro. His words meant an inexplicable way. As soon as he said this, Sun Shuro's face suddenly sank. As one of the 4 families, he naturally knew a lot about the means of Tianjian Gate. Once the 3 families in front of him really reported the matter, he would not be better in the future, not to mention the other 3 families. What do you want to do? After a long time, Sun Shuro said in a low voice. At this time, Huobie can still say that he has no purpose. I'm afraid no one here will believe it. Ha ha. With a faint smile, Huobie moved and came to a void not far from Sun Shuro with Huotiani behind him. With Huobie's action, the other 2 directions, Bai Ying and Zhuo family, also acted at this moment, rushed out of the crowd in 4 directions, southeast and northwest, each accounting for 1 side. Seeing this scene, Xiao Yang couldn't help frowning slightly at the moment. Seeing the 4 forces in front of him, he couldn't help but have a bad premonition in his heart. Sun Shuro is alone. Xiao Yang is naturally not afraid, But if the four families work together, even Xiao Yang is difficult to deal with. Sure enough, while Xiao Yang had just raised such an idea, Hua, who was opposite, looked at Sun Shuro with a sneer, gave a cold hum in his nose, and immediately took the shortcut. We can hold it down as if nothing had happened, but since we came, our four families naturally can't return empty-handed. Even if we can't get the fighting spirit inheritance, if we can take Xiao Yang back, it can also be said that it's worth it with merit. Hua sneered. At the same time, the other three also immediately understood the meaning of his words. Without fighting spirit inheritance, now Hua puts his goal on Xiao Yang. Do you want me to join hands with you? With a sigh of relief in his heart, Sun Shuro dared not be careless, so he had to ask carefully. At the same time, Bai Ying and Zhuolin frowned at Hua. The latter sneered, but sneered. Join hands? Join hands. It's just that the target you want to deal with is the narwhal snake, and we will catch Xiao Yang. At the same time, Hua also glanced at Bai Ying and Zhuolin on both sides. If he took action, the two families would not live in peace. Therefore, he had to say so. Why? You. Sun Shuro, don't forget your current situation. You are not qualified to argue with us. Otherwise, the three of us will work together. In the future, you Sun family can be removed from my four families. You dare. You see. Each of them said a word. In the end, Hua, Zhuo, and Bai looked at Sun Shuro together, which made the latter angry, but also a sense of powerlessness without intuition. Although what Hua said can't be trusted, it can't be trusted. Although his Sun family is one of the four families, it's just the last one. Even so, there are countless families coveting his Sun family in the western regions. Many forces are looking forward to his Sun family's fall, just because they don't have a chance. Now, Sun Shuro's mistakes, Xiao Yang's side actually increased greatly, which happened to be a perfect excuse to squeeze the Sun family out of the four family. With this helpless thought in his heart, Sun Shuro's body stayed in place for a long time. At the thought of his son's death, his anger was uncontrollable, but at the same time, he also knew that with his current strength, it was impossible to kill Xiao Yang. At present, the three families have their own goals, but it can be regarded as another way, avenge Sun Hanshi. Alas! After a long time, Sun Shuro slowly raised his head, looked at the other three people in front of him, and said in a deep voice, "Okay, I'll stop the narwhal snake, Xiao Yang. Don't worry, as long as you can hold the narwhal snake, as for Xiao Yang, with our strength, we can naturally take him down." Hua grinned, revealing a row of Mori white teeth. In his words, the meaning of disdain is self-evident. On the huge square, there are many strong people, and all kinds of eyes are looking at the 7 figures in the field and the huge snake. These 7 people are by Jia Bai Ying, Sun Jiasuan Shuro, Hua and Hua Tianyi of the Hua family, Zhuo Bentang and Zhuolin of the Zhuo family. As for the big snake, needless to say, it is naturally the narwhal snake. Xiao Yang stood tall and straight in the square. Beside him, the narwhal snake with more and more thick breath was bending and entrenching. The scarlet snake letter was revealed in the air from time to time. Gradually, the narwhal snake diffused a strong momentum and pressure, just like an invisible storm, sweeping across the square, so that the faces of most of the people present became particularly ugly. Even the people of the 4 families who were surrounded by Xiao Yang at the moment, everyone's faces were very dignified. This is only a short time. The strength of narwhal snake is close to that of the late 3-star fighting emperor. If this growth rate is put in the eyes of ordinary people, it may be sneered at, but don't forget that today's narwhal snake, but the powerful fighting emperor, practices according to the most ordinary cultivation methods. I don't know how many years it will take to make a breakthrough from the original 1-star dipper to the 3-star dipper. However, now, it's only a short time. Its strength has been raised to this terrible level, which is really incredible. In the field, Zhuolin stared at the narwhal snake with his eyes narrowed. Whenever he felt the stronger and stronger breath in the latter, Zhuolin would tremble in his heart and hate Sun Shuro. If it weren't for him, the biggest winner in this trip would be his Zhuo family, but now, it's useless to think more. Zhuolin had to take back his eyes and fell on Xiao Yang. His eyes became sharp again. Zhuolin's heart moved. The fighting spirit in his body quickly flowed through all the meridians in his body at the moment. As long as his heart moved, those powerful fighting spirit would immediately rush out like a wave. Even if he can't get the fighting spirit inheritance, he must take Xiao Yang back. Anyway, the relics of this trip must not return empty-handed. Of course, people with such ideas will not be the only Zhuolin family in the field at the moment. The people of the Hua family naturally think the same way. Only Bai Ying of the Bai family looks at Xiao Yang. Although his eyes are equally cold, they also contain some different colors in the depths of his eyes. Ha ha, Sun Shuro, I'll give you the beast. Suddenly, Hubei looked at Sun Shuro with a fierce smile and said, I know. Hearing the latter, Sun Shuro was also angry. He had to return with a cold voice, which turned his eyes to the narwhal snake. Beast! Dare you fight me again? After staring at the narwhal snake with a dark face and enough to bear the more powerful breath in the latter's body, Rao can't help twitching slightly with Sun Shuro's mind and the muscles on his face. However, Sun Shuro can only harden his scalp. At the same time, Sun Shuro's body moved, and the soles of his feet stamped on the void. His body suddenly swept over the sky, looking down at the narwhal snake below from top to bottom. Roar! With a low roar, the narwhal snake suddenly twisted. Then, it also went into the void and stood opposite Sun Shuro. The low roar in his mouth came out again. At the same time, a magnificent momentum swept out of the narwhal snake. When Sun Shuro felt this momentum, the look on his face couldn't help changing again. In such a short time, the strength of narwhal snake has been promoted to the later stage of the 3-star Fight Emperor. Even if he has performed the secret method at the moment, he is not weak. Damn it! This damn beast! He scolded angrily in his heart, but before Sun Shuro could act, the narwhal snake opposite first twisted his huge body and rushed towards Sun Shuro. At the same time, Zhuolin and others at the bottom also approached Xiao Yang again. The 5 people each held one side in a triangular shape and surrounded Xiao Yang in the middle. Unexpectedly, you are Xiao Yang, who is famous in the western regions. I just heard that a young man can have so much ability, which makes the 4 main schools headache. This time, you are really younger than the rumored one. There are more heroes than young people. Seeing Sun Shuro off with his own eyes, Hubei looked at Xiao Yang with a smile. His tone was also a little surprised. Although he and others had a hostile relationship with the black-robed youth in front of him, Hubei had to admit that Xiao Yang in front of him was really a great man of a generation. It was really amazing that he could achieve this record that shocked the people of the western regions at such an age. Hearing the speech, Xiao Yang glanced at the latter coldly, glancing at the 3 people in front of him one by one. Then he looked at Hubei again and said with a sneer, Elder Hubei thinks highly of me. To deal with a half-emperor, I still need so many strong fighters to come in person. I've seen the style of the 4 families, not only by bullying the small, but also by bullying the few with more. At the end of the speech, Xiao Yang hugged and arched his hands at the people in front of him, and grinned at the corners of his mouth, which also provoked a burst of whispers in the mouth of the strong fighting emperor around him. Hearing the whispers from the surrounding crowd, immediately, the faces of the 3 families in front of him could not help but sink slightly. Hubei's face was particularly ugly. Then Zhuolin took a step forward with a sneer, facing Xiao Yang and said coldly, If we are faced with ordinary semi-emperors, we naturally don't have to make a big fuss. However, since you can make the 4 major sects pay so much attention, our 4 families can't underestimate it. What's more, Mr. Xiao Yang fought against hundreds of semi-emperors in Hanshi City a few months ago. Even the 9 stars and semi-emperors can't resist Mr. Xiao Yang's fist. How dare we take Xiao Yang again, sir? Treat him as an ordinary semi-emperor. As soon as Zhuolin said this, the crowd around him became agitated. When it came to the war in Hanshi City a few months ago, everyone was right. Xiao Yang's face quickly became gloomy after hearing Zhuolin's words. Zhuolin, I'm curious about how you recognized me. At that time, Zhuo Bentang was sent to shoot me and said you weren't prepared before. I'm afraid no one believed it. Xiao Yang's face was low and his tone was extremely cold. If it weren't for Zhuolin, I'm afraid no one would recognize him even if the situation in the field has developed to the present. Ha. I have to say that Mr. Xiao Yang has not revealed any flaws since he entered the ruins. Even when he met us, he was very cautious, and the strength you showed made us dare not easily have friction with you. As soon as they said this, they nodded in affirmation. Otherwise, the person who recognized Xiao Yang's identity would not be alone. Of course, Bai Ying was the exception. He knew Xiao Yang's identity from the beginning. However, I'm afraid you forget that when you are outside the ruins, you clearly show an extremely powerful power. However, after entering the ruins, your power is limited to ordinary fighting emperors. This is the first flaw, and as for the second place that makes me suspicious. It was Sun Hanshi's death. Am I right? Zhuolin just wanted to speak, but Xiao Yang tightened his eyebrows and said in a deep voice. After seeing the smile on Zhuolin's mouth, Xiao Yang immediately thought of this. The death of Sun Hanshi made people know that Xiao Yang was among the ruins, and Zhuolin, who had doubts about it, had more doubts about Xiao Yang after knowing the news. This is the real reason why Xiao Yang exposed his identity. With this in mind, Xiao Yang couldn't help getting angry. It was obviously manipulated by someone else. The purpose was to force Xiao Yang to show up, so as to attract attention and make him achieve a deeper purpose. But it's a pity that today's Xiao Yang is still difficult to find out the culprit of all this. At most, he can only vaguely feel that this matter is inseparable from Bai Ying, but then he was helplessly dismissed. Bai Ying walked with his own people all the way, and it was impossible to spare his hands to do anything else. As for the Hua family, Xiao Yang never met them, and they were the first to enter the ruins. They didn't even know what Xiao Yang did later. They framed him, which was impossible to talk about. Hehe, by the way, it is said that Xiao Yang finally fell into the hands of the Bai family in the war in Hanshi City a few months ago, but let him run away. According to the news I got from the Zhong door, it seems that someone robbed him on the way and saved him. Is it true? Suddenly, Zhuolin turned his eyes to Bai Ying and stared at the latter with a smile. Young Master Zhuo, there's something in the story. Why, after all, this matter has nothing to do with the patriarch. Bai Ying's face was cold and his tone was slightly heavy. Seeing this, Zhuo Bentang behind Zhuolin immediately took a half-step forward, blocked half of Zhuolin's body behind him, and stared at Bai Ying opposite with cold eyes. Hehe, why did the Bai nationality say this? I just think of it for a moment and mention it casually. Zhuolin lightly put his hand on Zhuo Bentang's shoulder in front of him, which made the latter feel a little relieved. At the same time, he also said with a chuckle again. Hearing this, Bai Ying snorted coldly. Even if he didn't say more, he turned his eyes and looked at Xiao Yang. On the other side, Hua Bie's eyes turned back and forth, watching the dialogue between the two sides in the field, and the corners of his mouth quickly flashed a sneer. Zhuolin smiled faintly. Immediately, his eyes turned and looked at Xiao Yang. On the other side, Hua Bie was the same. Seeing the three people's eyes turn around, Xiao Yang's face gradually becomes cold and solemn. His heart reads a move. The fighting spirit in the cyclone in his body immediately flows rapidly along all meridians. With a big hand, the dark ruler immediately falls into his hand. After all this, Xiao Yang was afraid to be careless. Then he bent his fingers and flashed a black light. The body shape of the North King appeared next to Xiao Yang again. At the moment when the North King appeared, the people of these three forces could not help but frown slightly. They had some insight into the energy of the latter. Even as a 3-star fighting emperor, they could not underestimate any of them in the face of the North King. Hehe, I don't know the ghost. Who among the three of us can take the initiative to solve him? Zhuolin smiled faintly and glanced back and forth between Hua Bie and Bai Ying. Hearing the speech, they frowned slightly, but they looked at each other. No one had left. After a short moment, Bai Ying finally stood out with a slightly low face and stared at the two people in front of him. Immediately, he looked at the North King beside Xiao Yang. Give me this evil beast. As for Xiao Yang, it's up to you. When the words fell, Bai Ying's body suddenly moved, which was to quickly sweep away at the North King. At the same time, Xiao Yang thought, and the North King on one side quickly received the command. The purple and gold streamer-shrouded body suddenly moved, and the soles of his feet stepped heavily on the ground. For a while, the ground under the North King suddenly cracked like a spider's web, and at the same time, Bai Wang's body also burst out like a shell and rushed to Bai Ying. Bang! Then the next moment, the two collided. With the explosion, Bai Ying and Bai Wang's bodies flew back, and then they stood on the void. At the moment, a clear palm print appeared on the North King's chest. At the moment, strange black thunder was pouring out from the North King's body, and the palm print on his chest was quickly restored at a speed visible to the naked eye. At the same time, Bai Ying's face on the other side also looked rather ugly. Although he had the upper hand in the blow just now, the North King's punch also made his blood surge continuously. When people stared, they could clearly see that there was a palm-sized hole in Bai Ying's chest robe, even the skin under it. At the moment, it also becomes red. With his teeth clenched, Bai Ying couldn't help but hiss a burst of cold breath. Immediately, his face sank suddenly. He turned his head and looked at the Zhuo and Hua families on both sides. Can you watch it here? As soon as they said this, the two families were stunned and immediately looked at each other. Then Hua Bie looked at Bai Ying, narrowed his eyes and smiled. Bai leader, you are also a 3-star fighting emperor. You can't even solve a puppet, can you? You can, then you come. Ah. Bai Ying's eyes stared, and when he was neutral, he let out an angry drink. Immediately, he made the person in front of him speechless and silent immediately. They are willing to support the strong people around Xiao Yang. How can they easily carry this stone on their shoulders? With Bai Ying's voice, Zhuolin and Huobie were also helpless. Their eyes met for a moment. Soon, they looked at Xiao Yang again. Poof. Then, with the sound of poof, the column of fighting spirit immediately rose from the Zhuo and Hua families, and 4 pairs of eyes looked at Xiao Yang at the same time. Xiao Yang, do you take the initiative to go with us, or do you want us to kill you here? Huobie burst out a strong fighting light in his eyes and looked down at Xiao Yang. The voice of words from his mouth rang back and forth through the square like a burst of thunder. Oh, sorry, I don't choose either. Hearing the speech, Xiao Yang smiled coldly, and his body covered in black robes shook slightly. After a while, gorgeous flames swarmed out of his body and quickly wrapped Xiao Yang. In a twinkling of an eye, Xiao Yang turned into a flaming fireman. Stubborn. Since you insist on dying, don't blame us for being rude. The cry fell, and Huobie's body moved. His body suddenly turned into a streamer and shot at Xiao Yang. At the same time, behind him, Hua Tianyi, Zhuolin and Zhuo Bentang also turned around and surrounded Xiao Yang with a half-encirclement. Oh, what a coincidence, I'm not going to be polite to you. Seeing the 4 people coming, Xiao Yang couldn't help laughing. He shook his huge foot in his hand, and the gorgeous fire in his eyes burst out suddenly. Then the next moment, his body turned into a flame streamer, like a meteor, and hit the 4 figures in the air. At this moment, the real duel officially begins. Xiao Yang, die. Looking at Xiao Yang who rushed over without dodging, Huobie's face looked colder and colder. With a wave of his big hand, the fighting spirit in the palm of his hand was thin, and then it condensed into a huge broad sword. As soon as the wrist turned, the fighting spirit condensed on the huge sword, and the bright light burst out from it immediately. As soon as the sword edge turned, it stabbed Xiao Yang. Before the edge of the sword arrived, the fierce and unparalleled sword spirit had quickly fallen over Xiao Yang's head. The powerful momentum fell down, as if Mount Tai was pressing the top. Xiao Yang was out of breath at once. Even the forward speed could not help being affected. Die. Seeing this scene, Huobie immediately burst out a fierce smile. His face looked more and more ferocious. At the same time, the palm holding the handle of the huge sword suddenly exerted force, and the turbulent fighting spirit in his body poured out of his body more madly and quickly covered the broad and strong sword body. The sword is fierce and domineering. This sword will kill you. After that, Hua Tianyi, Zhuo Bentang and Zhuolin also kept up with each other. They all poured out their fighting spirit crazily. The power of the strong fighting emperor was displayed incisively and vividly at this moment. In the twinkling of an eye, the distance between the 4 strong fighting emperors and Xiao Yang is also approaching rapidly. At the next moment, the 2 convenience will really collide together. At this time, Xiao Yang, who swept forward quickly, suddenly swept the vast soul power in the center of his eyebrows, and the gorgeous fire in his eyes gushed out. In a twinkling of an eye, a black robe figure was rapidly condensed around him. When the 4 people opposite saw these 4 figures, the look on each person's face could not help but suddenly stagnate. Even the body shape flying forward was also an instant meal, and the horror in the hearts of several people could be imagined. This is Xiao Yang. Another Xiao Yang. How could this be possible? This is definitely just an empty shadow. At this moment, Rao was shocked by the 4 people's nature. The people of these 2 families are still like this. The strong fighters outside the court are naturally more frightened. As strong fighters, they can clearly perceive that the second Xiao Yang who suddenly appears is emitting a rather strong momentum and pressure at the moment, although the strength of the pressure is only 5-star and half emperor, but which of the people present doesn't know about Xiao Yang? The strength of the latter can't be distinguished only by the level of cultivation. As Zhuolin said, in the face of Xiao Yang, even those who fight the emperor should also be careful. Otherwise, it's uncertain when the ship will capsize in the gutter. Isn't Zhao Xian a good example? When the second Xiao Yang appeared, he waved his big hand and burst into different fires. He quickly condensed a huge flame ruler in his hand. Then the giant ruler waved down, and rushed away at the 4 people who were coming. At the same time, Zhuolin's 4 people also quickly recovered and quickly suppressed the shocked emotion in their hearts. Then, they fought fiercely and collided with the 2 Xiao Yang coming face to face. Boom! The next moment, accompanied by an earth-shaking bang, the 4 figures stepped back and withdrew a few steps in the void. Then the body shook slightly, which was to remove the great force on the body, lift their eyes and look at Xiao Yang opposite. As for the incarnation, Xiao Yang burst out with a bang while flying upside down, turned into nothingness and disappeared on the square. The soles of his feet firmly stepped on the void. On the void under Xiao Yang's feet, black space cracks spread, and great force poured out. Then, the void collapsed suddenly, and Xiao Yang's body stopped struggling. Wheezing in his mouth, he felt a faint fishy sweet smell from his throat, and the muscles on Xiao Yang's face couldn't help shaking slightly. Compared with these 4 people, Xiao Yang was extremely embarrassed. The joint efforts of the 4 strong fighters gave him no chance to fight. Until now, Xiao Yang fully realized that the 4 families were under the unified command after all. Although they fought openly and secretly and did not favor each other, once the critical moment came, they would still stand on the united front, but Xiao Yang didn't expect it. If the 4 families do not cooperate with each other, Xiao Yang will have a chance to profit from it. But now, in the face of the 4 strong fighting emperors at the same time, Xiao Yang is far from an opponent. In the void, Xiao Yang frowned, his mind moved, and his fighting spirit surged rapidly, which pressed down the surging qi and blood. Xiao Yang suffered a lot from that blow just now. He thought he could meet it with the power of incarnation, but unfortunately, Xiao Yang underestimated the power of the strong fighting emperor. What's more, he was still facing 4 strong fighting emperors. Haha, I thought you had some means. It seems that you are just so. I think too much of you. Xiao Yang, send you 4 character comments, vulnerable. At this time, Ba on the opposite void stared at Xiao Yang with wide eyes. He grinned at Xiao Yang with a sneer. He waved his big hand and waved his huge sword. For a while, several terrible sword lights came at Xiao Yang. The sound of hunting broke through the air on the square. Xiao Yang's face suddenly became dignified, and he made a squeaking sound with his huge palm again. Then, Xiao Yang's fierce color surged up on his face, and his fighting spirit flowed rapidly. The huge ruler in his hand also waved forward abruptly. The flame devours the wave ruler. At the same time, Xiao Yang's huge Shen heavy ruler also came out continuously. In the twinkling of an eye, several gorgeous ruler mans also met the sword light. Bang bang! The sound of successive explosions came out in mid-air, followed by waves of energy ripples, which swept across the square like a cloud, so that the void between the 2 people was agitated. Just as the energy ripples dispersed, Xiao Yang only heard a hiss. In the void in front of him, the strong figure suddenly appeared. At the same time, a huge sword with half of Xiao Yang's body was also falling on Xiao Yang's head. This video will end here.